Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Perpetual Chess. Before we introduce our returning guest, I wanted to give a shout out to our presenting chess education sponsor, Chessable.com. As you may have heard last week, Grandmaster Sam Shankland is out with a new course on the Neo-Catalan, an update to an ongoing series, incredibly detailed with some fresh ideas. They've also got a new free course out on beating the Stafford Gambit. If you're in the trenches below 1600, you're probably facing the Stafford Gambit constantly, so it's worth a little effort. And there's a new beginner black repertoire from friend of the pod, I am Andres Toth, among many other offerings. So always be sure to just check out my favorite courses, which is linked to in the description, as well as what is new. Now, let's introduce our guest. So he is a husband, a father, a grandmaster, an author, one of Poland's top players. He's also a high-level trainer. He's coached the National Youth Chess Academy of the Polish Chess Federation. And as I mentioned before, I'm a big fan of his first book, Universal Chess Training. And now I'm a big fan of his second new book, which is called Supreme Chess Understanding, Statics and Dynamics. We will be discussing it as well as lots of chess improvement. But first, let's welcome back to the show, Grandmaster Wojciech Moranda. Welcome, Wojciech.
Hello, thank you for the invitation. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, how did I do with your name that time? We were practicing before we hit record.
As if you were a native speaker, really.
Thanks, you're too kind. Well, Wojciech, it's great to have you back. I always find you quite insightful, and as I mentioned, I found the book greatly enjoyable, and it's funny as well. Which I know when you're. Do you write your book in English or Polish?
Well, I do it basically in English. Obviously, proofreaders on the side of the publishing house have, like a lot of work with me, but I'm really grateful for their effort. And naturally, it would be rather kind of cumbersome, cumbersome procedure for me to first write in Polish and then kind of translate it to English. Actually, my working language has been English for many years now. Although I'm still learning, still trying to get better. The book was written from the start, from scratch, in the English language.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. As Wojciech, we'll be getting into this at some point, but he was the trainer of Levi Rosman, and he did a podcast on the Gotham City pod, May It Rest in Peace or May It Rise Again, and they talked there about his background as a corporate lawyer. So I'm sure that informs your excellent English. But we might get to that stuff later, but it's been a while here on Perpetual Chess since we've done a chess improvement Q&A. So we've got some great questions from Patreon supporters of the pod, and we got some great questions from Twitter. And if you're up for it, Wojciech, I'd like to just dive right in because we got a lot of them.
Yeah, definitely looking right into that. Let's dive right in. Absolutely.
Okay, excellent. So first up is a question I've been waiting for the proper person to ask, someone with proper authority. And this is from Patreon supporter of the pod, Noah Zucker, who asks, number one, and this just shows, I think, which is a topic of my book, and you can see the themes in your books as well, Wojciech, the idea that people get so much different advice. And Noah says, how important is it to memorize complete games? I see it mentioned a lot, but at his level, sub 2000 Lead Chess Rapid, USCF/FIDE/chess.com around 1600. It seems like, or less than 1600, it seems like focusing on tactics and endgames would be more worthwhile. So is it worthwhile to memorize complete games, Wojciech?
Complete games, you're saying. If I think about, from my standpoint, from my perspective about me having been learning, complete games, throughout my career, those will be probably classic games. I mean, games that have been played by the old masters from the 50s and the 60s, basically as some sort of an element of chess culture of every single player who has like some kind of aspirations. I'm not a huge fan of learning like games, memorizing them just for the sake of like knowing something perfectly, except for maybe using this technique to learn how to play blindfold chess, let's say. Yeah, so I can remember myself, when I was like a little kid going hiking with my parents, and obviously for a little child, hiking per se wasn't like the most enjoyable of activities. So what I would do before leaving, I would actually memorize a couple of games, and I would train my vision perceptivity skills this way. So imagine you learn a game that is, like you memorize a game that is 50 moves long, and then, while hiking, you ask yourself constantly those questions. For example, as of move 25, how does the white structure look like? Or maybe as of move 37, let's say, where are the bishops of both of the parties placed? Yeah, and this way I would be using memorization as means of training my blindfold playing skills, and those skills have stayed with me till this day of time, which means that maybe this method is actually quite effective. There are many more other methods of learning how to play blindfold, but specifically, I wouldn't be putting any emphasis on learning, longer games by heart, except for classic games. There are definitely more useful methods, for a chess player to benefit from the methods of training, definitely to benefit from. That's for sure.
Yeah, I agree, and I love that story about being bored on hikes and learning, and I can certainly understand in that sort of circumstance. But yeah, other than that, if you're not on a grandmaster track, I had responded to Noah's question when he originally sent it, and I said something along similar lines. I mean, there's so much you can do in chess um, to get better, but there's also an opportunity cost, and I feel like memorizing games probably wouldn't make the cut.
I
And
mean,
he had
I'm sorry. I'm sorry for interrupting. I just wanted to say that there are so many different training methods, and in general, researchers say that we should use like a whole spectrum, like a whole plethora of those, because we never know which one of these is gonna prove to be most helpful for ourselves. On the other hand, there are methods which are well established, like analysis of games, even playing tournaments, like training games, solving like well selected puzzles, and those methods are always going to be better than others. I'm not advising against memorizing complete games, because you cannot hurt yourself by doing that, but you need to be aware of the fact that we do have, in today's fast-paced environment, we do have less and less time available for training. And if this happens to be the case, we might want to use it as well as possible. Also economically, I'd say. Yeah?
Yeah, excellent advice. And Noah had a follow up on a similar theme, which is he says he has the same question regarding annotating games. Um, so he mentions in this sort of cult favorite, controversial book, Rapid Chess Improvement. I don't know if you're familiar with that one, Wojciech, but
I've heard the title, but it rings a bell. But I haven't read it, to be honest. No, no.
okay, it's by this guy who he made a big jump as an adult in his 20s from about 1400 to 2000, and used like a flashcard method and a method he called the seven circles. It was written in the early 2000s, so parts of it are outdated, but it's looked at as sort of the predecessor of the woodpecker method. Neil Bruce and I did a podcast where we talked about it and the woodpecker method, if listeners are interested. But anyway, it's a mildly controversial but also sort of cult classic book written specifically for adults about getting better at chess. So, but anyway, what Noah asks is, he says he's De La Maza in this book is particularly dismissive of a coach who told him to annotate 100 grandmaster games. So he's also curious what you think about annotating GM games as a component of study and improvement for, let's say in this case, an adult amateur.
So I'm going to put it like this. Basically, annotating your own games is indispensable. Analyzing them, drawing conclusions in order to become better. Everybody has to do it, and that's priority in my opinion. When it goes for analyzing somebody else's games, I'd say that again the most economic of approaches I can figure out for the time being would be to actually instead go for some already well annotated grandmaster games, games that do convey some kind of a message, some kind of the games that are valuable from both instructive and entertaining if possible, right? So I can certainly recommend, like Topolov's games from 2005 till 2010 if somebody wants to learn how to handle, the exchange sacrifice, the positional exchange sacrifice, for example. And it's better, in my personal opinion, to learn from the annotations of those like high class players instead of trying to reinvent the wheel basically and trying to figure out like what the player had in mind when he was parting with that exchange, let's say. That's just an example, obviously, but it's just that, again, I'm going to come back to the problem of the availability of time. A day is only 24 hours long. We devote, let's say, 8 hours per day to sleep, and typically adult improvers are also professionally active people, which means that if such a person happens to have 2 hours of spare time available for their own training per day, that's a luxury. So let us not waste it for something that is less effective than the well-established methods. These being analyzing one's own games first, and only afterwards, if we happen to have a little bit of time left, maybe we can dig deeper into. I mean, first of all, as a priority, the annotations of strong players, and maybe if we want to do additional research for ourselves, why not? But only as a sort of this kind of luxury exercise, the exercise. That we to which we devote the time that we didn't have an idea what else should we be doing in the meantime exactly, right? But I assume that nowadays this is not a problem. There's always some kind of source, some kind of puzzle, some kind of a book to learn from. Yeah. So in other words, definitely not the most important or the most valuable, most helpful training method available. That's for sure. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I agree as well. And Wojciech, I know we talked some chess books. I know you're an avid reader. Do you have any specific recommendations for someone who might be looking for well annotated Grandmaster games?
One idea would be monographies. An absolute classic is Zurich 1953, naturally. When it goes for more recent events, I remember spending countless hours with the St. Louis 2005 book. I think it was published by Quality Chess, as far as I can tell. It's still somewhere behind me on my, between all of those other titles. I assume that the listeners, do they see me or do they not see me? I'm just
So
asking.
you're on YouTube, but most people listen in audio. So
Ah, okay. So I have a huge kind of shelf behind me, like with books. Probably it's just like 1/3 of the things that I have in my apartment. So it might not seem impressive, but yeah, definitely it's somewhere out there. But there are so many other sources. I very much like the book by Nikola Nestorovich and his father. I forgot his first name though. Basically, the title goes like this: Counterattack and Defense in 64 and 64 examples or games. It was published with the Zahovsky publishing house. They are Serbian. Although it's more like a compendium, like some kind of a collection of games. I often use it, for training purposes. I kind of select the puzzles from the games that were annotated. They're very extensively annotated, and definitely this is a great source of such games, in my
okay,
opinion, as well.
excellent. Yeah, and on the topic of annotating your own games, this book it could use an updating, but it's still great. The Road to Chess Improvement by Alex Yermolinsky, and he really walks you through how to go through your own games in painstaking detail. I know friend of the pod, GM Jesse Cry, has it in the Chess Dojo Discord recommended books. So
Mhm.
he's keeping it in the zeitgeist, and I definitely recommend it as well.
Yeah, maybe one more thought, if I may. Basically, when I train my students within my own chess school, basically, what I frequently ask my students to do is to annotate, like a recent game of theirs, for our training purposes. So what we do afterwards, in the meantime, I annotate the very same game in an unbiased way from my own perspective. So what I would be saying about the game, typically the player is going to know more because he or she they were involved basically in playing it. They have some specific maybe feelings and emotions attached there too. But so my analysis is going to be more material, more objective in nature. And what we do, we kind of compare our works this way. So on the one hand, we've got the analysis of typically less experienced player, and from the technical perspective it's not going to be so great, especially if it's like their first time. But I'm interested in the thoughts. I'm interested also in instilling those proper analytical habits upon them, basically making sure that they're genuinely curious. They do not leave any stone unturned when it goes for the assessment of the position. That they Although they dig deep into the analysis, they also use predominantly verbal comments, right? Because this is how the coach specifically recognizes whether the player understands what he's saying, what he's claiming, in the analysis or not. And also, a very important thing, that the one that most of the people forget about, is that at the end of every single analysis, there is the conclusion sections, the section that should be included. And quite often, I need to say that obviously the conclusions have been drawn, but the pen has not been put to paper in this context. Yeah, so I always remind my students what the final purpose of analysis actually is: becoming better. And if we want to become better, we need to kind of draw those conclusions, and also kind of try to abide by them, in the future. Try to avoid those mistakes. Try to make sure that they're not going to be committed ever again.
Yeah, that's good advice. And I can see that in your books. I've mentioned before, I referred to Universal Chess Training as like a game collection in disguise, because it's presented as a puzzle book, but then the answers have the entire game. And often they go on for like 15 moves, because I can see now, hearing you describe it, because of what you're describing, the need to sort of actually move forward in the position and figure out what you think of the position in order to make a decision about whether to go down that route. And you can see that in your new book as well. So it's good that you're practicing what you preach.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, times are changing, and this is also why the manner in which books, in my personal opinion, should be written should also, kind of be subject to change. What do I mean by this? Basically, we all know those kind of exercise books, for example, which feature plenty of examples, plenty of puzzles, but every single one features maybe like the answer to it, the solution features one line, a couple of words of comment, and then the author carries on. In my personal opinion, even if I were supposed to write, like a book on technical chess, or maybe on strategy once again. Basically, I put a lot of emphasis on not only explaining the motif that I want to, like show to the reader, but also to kind of demonstrate how it is going to work in practice. What is going to be the typical kind of path in which the direction in which the game is likely to escalate later on. And there's a very important reason for that, because even if we are able to learn some piece of strategy, some kind of piece of information pertaining to strategy, we go to our over the board game, we apply it in practice, we still need to bring the full point home. We need to be prepared for what comes next. In particular, we need to be able to prove that we have, understood the topic in a comprehensive way, and that also we're going to be able to, kind of prove to the opponent, sometimes even in a tactical manner, that our concept, holds, that basically our concept makes sense. So this is this holistic approach to teaching chess.
Yeah, it makes sense. And in the time of AI taking over everything, engines being able to spit out the best move, like, what value is a trainer going to provide if not explanations?
Exactly. I mean, AI has been all over the news recently, and I have, for example, students who have been affected. But in my personal opinion, it's like a little revolution that is taking place right now. We chess players have already been subjected to it once Alpha Zero appeared on the market. Basically, Leela as its descendant, right? So we have already been kind of affected by the whole kind of by this situation. And I think that chess, like human chess, has survived this so far, right? So we do not struggle with the problem of draws, in over the board chess yet, right? Also, like Leela. Actually, compared to Stockfish, to his previous version, which was like a typical engine, like the one that was fed with information on how much a pawn on a2 is worth and how much is a pawn worth on a7, right? Basically, Leela gave a lot of ideas to players, especially on GM level, and also led to some kind of principles being revised. Like the things that like Stockfish claimed were, I mean, maybe not abolished, but to a certain extent put into question, right? And this led to so many kind of also beautiful games being played in the meantime on the highest level, and many of those players would later admit that it was like the idea that they applied was born as a result of Leela, this kind of human Leela kind of cooperation, right? Even today's version of Stockfish, when we think about it, as far as I know, it's a hybrid, right? So it's like parts, like an engine, like a typical kind of machine, and parts like a neural network. And I think that humanity together with AI is also going in this kind of a direction. For some, in the beginning, this kind of revolution may, sometimes cost those people jobs. If we speak already, generally about the situation, but as with every revolution, like the Industrial Revolution, for example, it eventually led to the creation of new jobs as well, right? So I'm mildly optimistic. But when it goes for chess specifically, I'm very, very optimistic that this is going to lead just to more better development of chess players. It's going to, increase the general level of playing strength of the chess populace.
Well said. Yeah, it is interesting to see the rest of the world catch up with the chess world in this regard. And yeah, things seem to be accelerating. It's a fascinating time to be alive. But speaking of chess, let's bring it back because we got a lot of questions. So next up is from Sir Igor on Twitter, and he for context is about 1600chess.com, and he says he's hardly studied openings and he thinks he could benefit from studying them more. What's an effective approach to studying openings for someone who practically never has? Opening books, engine, sample many openings versus studying one deeply. And then he says, thanks.
Mm-hmm. So first of all, I should start off with speaking about my methodology of teaching or maybe even learning openings myself. So it's about those those three tiers of learning, right? Understanding, memorization, and practice. So first of all, whenever I start any kind of cooperation with a new student of mine, basically I start, we start off by talking also about their opening repertoires, whether their expectations, how, maybe they want to, thanks to my help, maybe they want to change something, they want to learn something new. And after every training, I provide them with, like well researched opening surveys. And I always tell them, like what to do about it, basically. Not just to kind of store it on the hard drive and forget about it and never come back to it, obviously. And now it's different. First of all, like it's best to first to comprehensively read through such a survey, and try to understand, like also make the moves on the board to make this muscle memory work, right? So first of all, we want to understand what the whole survey, what the variation is all about, right? Naturally, there is going to come a time when we feel so confident about our knowledge of the survey, and this way also about the system, that we might want to test ourselves whether we would be able to kind of like to check our knowledge, like to whether we have memorized this variation. If so, now comes the time for practice, right? So typically we either ask our trusted sparring partner, or maybe we can go to also to leechess.org. Why specifically leechess? Because they have this possibility, this function that they have this Stockfish engine embedded, and they can in the software, right, in the platform, and you can actually play against the positions that you choose that you want to train on the given day against the engine, but against like a version of the engine that is slightly lower rated, that is programmed to commit some mistakes from time to time, to be more human in action, right? Why so? Because if you keep on training against an engine at its peak, at its like peak strength, you're gonna feel discouraged very quickly, right? Because
Right.
it's gonna be beating you to the ground every single time. And if it's level 6 or 7 out of 8, that's a challenge, but not something that you cannot handle, I guess, right? So this is, as much when it goes for methodology, when it goes for the sources that the listener should be using, in my personal opinion. It depends obviously on the skill set, right? If the listener would be a GM, GMs typically know a little bit about everything, and for them, they just consult some very 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 good like sources like Chessable, for example, for sure, and they dig deep into those lines, to do more research with an engine. For amateurs or adult improvers, I suggest like a different path to enlightenment, namely, first of all, to equip themselves with some sort of a book or maybe course that speaks about, like a system, like a given variation or opening in general, right? In terms of ideas. There used to be this series titled Move by Move. I'm not really sure what who's the publisher. It could have been some kind of British publishing house,
It
as
was
far as I
Everyman,
know.
yeah.
Could be, yeah. So basically, I love the book. I loved the series many years ago when I was a teenager. Although back then already I was like 2400 rated. They helped me a lot. For me, they were already back then a little bit verbose, but I assume that for a 1600, 1700 rated player, they're going to be just fine. Yeah, it's more important at this level to put emphasis on ideas, plans, motifs, concepts than specific variations. We do not need to, at this level, we do not need to learn the opening beyond move 10 or 12, I assume, because we're not even going to remember all the things this way. We're supposed to make sure that our opening repertoire is comprehensive, that we know what to do against the Grob as black, or maybe we know what to play against all major all major first moves of white. But we need to learn first of all how to play those openings. It's more like like if you'd be like a gamer, it is more about learning the lore of the game, the storyline behind the game, instead of like specific keyboard combinations, for example, right? And engines at this level, they're not supposed to be used at all. Personally, I started using the engines at the age of 15, which might sound surreal when you think about it, but those were different times. By the way, engines were super stupid back then, right? They were already starting to be better and better and better, but they would be huge material lovers, for example. Yeah. So this is, I think, the best piece of advice that I can give to create like a complete repertoire till move 10 or 12 on a basic level, but conceptually mastered, obviously, without even using the engine. There's no point in using it for the time being.
Yeah. Okay. Great advice. Let's go on to the next question, which is from Jim Jones on Twitter. Thanks for the question, Jim. He says he sees that Supreme Chess Understanding seems to explore factors related to static and dynamic elements of the game. And he's curious at what rating level do those concepts become important to study? Does it make sense for a low rated player to have an awareness level of these concepts?
Mm-hmm. So, the book itself is written. I mean, when I was writing it, whom I had in mind was an ambitious improver, typically rated at least 1800. It doesn't mean, however, that the topic as such is immediately irrelevant for anybody below this threshold, and I'm going to explain very quickly. Let's imagine a typical 1600 rated player. So, what's going to be the typical mistake such persons commit? I think they frequently drop material, I guess, right? So, imagine yourself being a pawn down in the middle game. What do you do? What do you do in such a case in order to increase your chances of survival? Probably you're supposed to, I call it like wiggling. You're supposed to complicate matters. You're supposed to go after the opponent. You're supposed to start creating some dynamic threats, right? And on the other hand, if it's your opponent who drops material, you start understanding that if nothing changes, basically it's going to be smooth sailing towards victory. So pieces are going to be traded off. All of a sudden, you get a pawn in game, a pawn up, which is winning typically. And this simple example, I think it already shows the importance of statics and dynamics in chess. I mean, knowing how a little bit about all the imbalances that can occur in the game of chess is necessary for just about any player of any playing strength imaginable, in my opinion. Naturally, I like using, for example, comparisons to other sports. Let's imagine like a tennis player and an amateur tennis player asks his coach whether it makes sense to learn a drop shot. Let's assume, right? And the tennis coach is going to say, yeah, forehand, backhand. Obviously, you might want to learn how to serve because those are the things that you're going to be frequently doing. But it doesn't mean that in any game of yours, the need for a drop shot is not going to occur. It will. It eventually will. If you do not do a drop shot at a certain point of time, you might lose that point. So, in other words, although the topic of statics and dynamics may sound rather advanced at first, rather abstract in nature, I wouldn't really say that an amateur player, especially the ambitious one, can simply walk past by it and completely ignore it. Definitely not. Yeah, even this kind of a manifestation, the idea that I described, the situation that I described a second ago, actually it happens in every single amateur game. So if statics and dynamics they are applicable to every single amateur game, I think that this is a topic, a theme that is worth researching at least a little bit, I guess.
Yeah, and just a couple things to add as someone who's read your book. Number one, I mean, the material itself, the moves, like if you're rated below 1800, as you say, you're not going to find a lot of them because they're amazing. I mean, like that 95 move in the Howell Esipenko game, like there's so many moves that just kind of make you just fall out of your chair if you're not prepped for them. But that's also what makes it so that anyone lower rated may also sort of just appreciate the ideas. Um, and we have a question from longtime friend and collaborator of the podcast, the Habit Grandmaster himself, known for his own hardworking study habits when he's not working in his day job or in his family life. Neil Bruce asks, what is the most effective method to get better at positional chess?
Um, that's a tough question because positional chess is a broad theme in itself. I mean, positional chess. How do we define this? Many people perplex positional chess with strategic play, but I would, if I were to say, I would define positional chess as this type of an approach or game that the given position demands from us. Yeah. So, for example, in a given situation, we might want to pay attention to the weaknesses of the opponent, let's say, or maybe we might want to try to figure out the nature of the structure and the this kind of consequences for the activity of the pieces, right? In general, positional play has a lot to do with strategy. In other words, it means that if we train strategy, we simultaneously most probably also we become better at positional play. So what's the best way of training strategy? Definitely solving puzzles, analyzing one's games, with particular emphasis on again on those long-term elements, right? Static elements like structure, planning, ideas, motifs, maneuvering, etc. There is simply no better method than this, I guess. Obviously, if we happen to know some very good classic games featuring like some sort of a topic that belongs to positional chess, a game in which one of those older masters, carried out a specific thematic kind of a specific theme from scratch, all the way from the beginning to the end. The analysis of such a game may also represent very good training material, that's for sure. But in general, this is no rocket science, right? Just using good books, good sources, with puzzles. What I can certainly recommend is, in this context, surely the book by Johan Hellsten. I think the title was Mastering Middle Game Strategy, something like this.
Mastering chess strategy, I think. Yeah.
Something like with Everyman. I'm not really sure about this though, but the listener can easily find this book online. That's for sure.
Yeah, also available on Chessable. Yeah, and Hellsten's got a three-part series, including an endgame and an opening one, and they're all fantastic. Um, and Neil knows this topic well, even though he's the one who asked this question. He's read a lot of books on this topic, so I do think. But more broadly, as you said, reading books is helpful for this. And one thing that comes to mind is, as you say, if you're going through a game and trying to come up with plans, I think one friction point that an amateur player might come against is they don't know what they don't know. So in that case, like a book is helpful, but it sounds to me from what you're saying, like some sort of interfacing with a trainer might be helpful, because back to our discussion about AI, that is one area where if we're talking about positional chess, where the pieces go, some feedback from a stronger player might be helpful in guiding you at some point.
Well, absolutely, but this is, in my personal opinion, a slightly different topic. Namely, we can have a player who knows everything about every single structure that is available in chess, but then again, like his own personal study is not going to help him excel because, like the way how he wants to apply this knowledge in over the board games might be barred by some kind of other deficiencies of his playing style. Yeah? So the work of a coach actually, I mean, depending on the level of the player, right? But we can assume that in this case is more like figuring out, not only what the player does not know, but also helping him get the most of what he already knows. Right, but this is like such a deep kind of a topic that we could spend like hours, countless hours, like talking about it. But it's outside the scope of the question, I guess, to a certain extent.
Okay. Yeah, but that's interesting topic for sure. Um, okay, and on the topic of coaching, our next few questions are more related to your work as a trainer, although certainly some lessons for improvers as well. Will asks, he says, outside of your coaching sessions, what habits and practices have you noticed that distinguished your most successful students?
hmm Well, obviously, my most successful students are the ones who are typically the strongest in terms of the successes that they achieve. Right. So, for example, I have some students who are like close to 2600 rated. I've cooperated with some even higher rated players on a more like ad hoc basis. For example, they want to prepare for a specific tournament, or maybe they want me to help them eliminate like a specific weakness in their playing style. On the other hand, I think the question pertains more to those soft skills, to those
Yeah, well,
kind
if
of.
I may add, he actually, sorry, Wojciech, but he also said, especially like on the board chess skills. So he's not just interested in like what their discipline method is away from the board, but eliminating how they eliminate weaknesses in their play.
Okay. Now that makes things difficult to answer, to be honest, because if I because I tend to teach students, within the spectrum from 1500 rating to 2700 more or less, like the top kind of level player whom I have trained. But what's the point? The point is that depending on their playing strength, obviously their weaknesses are gonna vary greatly, which means that like the methods of having those weaknesses eliminated are also gonna be really different. Let's put it like this. Yeah. So this is also why it's very difficult for me to answer this question regarding specific over the board kind of methods of fixing those weaknesses jointly for all of the people whom I have trained or trained within some kind of a common frame. Yeah? It is certainly when it goes for training those 2600s, those big guys, let's say, like the role of the coach is going to be different. Probably they know about where their weaknesses already. So the coach simply needs to be like a provider of high class materials. Maybe the coach is going to be helping very much with the recon of opponents, right? Maybe also. Probably serving with his experience how to handle like a specific situation. Yeah? Then again, if we're talking, for example, about some adult improvers, right? So in this case, it's already slightly different because they do have their weaknesses. Typically, an adult improver is going to be weaker at tactics, and their understanding, however, is going to be very strong. Yeah? They approach like the game of chess very conceptually. They're looking for universal methods, how to make their game better. And so the answer is immediately springs to mind. I guess it's about like making sure that their tactical vision, their ability to calculate variation is not gonna be like that much lower than all the other skills that they have, right? When it goes for training kids, it's also different because when training kids, kids are like a walking weakness. They do not have like a specific weakness, but they have weaknesses everywhere, basically. So we try not to shape them by force by kind of forcing them to grind hard 10 hours per day, but we want to try to maintain the flame of interest in the child, right? And if the flame of interest is burning, let's put it like this, metaphorically, those weaknesses are going to start disappearing one after the other sooner or later, because the child is going to sort of take care of them also subconsciously. Like if he's going to start studying some games, playing more, analyzing more, curiosity. And this curiosity kind of thing, this brings me actually to like the soft skills that are general for players of all playing strengths, with whom I had worked. Basically, they're genuinely curious, about the game. They get a position and they're never satisfied with the answer that's unclear. I represent the opinion that if the coach says, okay, the position is unclear, let's go on, that the coach probably needs to do better next time. Basically, the coach is the one who answers the questions. The coach should never leave any stone unturned, never say that something is unclear. We need to learn the truth about the position. We dig deeper, right? Also, those players, they are very. I mean, what is like a common kind of character trait for all of them? Regularity. So they do not need to be begged, let's say, to get up in the morning, start grinding, analyzing, training, etc. Also, it's like, psychologically speaking, this time, the most successful students of mine, they barely have any ego. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that they shouldn't be proud of themselves. They should be. Yeah, but it should be optimally like this: that if a coach says something in the best interest of the player should like soak it up as a sponge, right? And the player should actually not never feel offended, especially as this piece of advice is given for the sake of them becoming better. Yeah? I often quote this kind of a funny story that I had recently, because recently I played the Polish championships, individual championships, and it's played in a tiebreak format. And in one of the rapid games, I missed mate in two, which sounds hilarious, basically, obviously. But my opponent, who is a grandmaster, didn't see it. I didn't see it, so I'm in good company, I say. Yeah? Anyway, so I had this training session with a student of mine, and I said to him, pertaining to his game, yeah, you see, you missed this one, and next time maybe try applying this kind of train of thought instead, in order to avoid such mistakes. And half jokingly, obviously, but my student responded, but coach, you missed a mate and two yourself last time.
Right.
Like, you're right, and I didn't take it personally, obviously, but I felt for a second there that maybe the student, like this ego, is somewhere around the corner of the psyche of the student of mine. Maybe there's something about it. I didn't react. I was obviously laughing, because like the whole situation is obviously very laughable. I'm just saying that the most kind of that the students who are most likely to excel, they treat every kind of piece of criticism as an opportunity to become better. Yeah, and not as some kind of personal attack. But obviously, you can be like Cristiano Ronaldo, or maybe, I don't know, like Neymar. You can have like those different psychological reactions to different critical situations on the pitch. I mean, in chess on the board, and you can still become great, like a great chess player. But it gets tougher. It gets tougher in such a case, right? Especially if there's a period of time when a period of time kicks in when things aren't going exactly as planned, I'd say. So those would be, I mean, the soft skills for sure. And also, I think that I managed to explain sort of along the way what are the biggest problems, or of like specific kind of player groups that I stumble upon most often, during their training.
Wow. Fascinating insights. So curious and no ego, noted. The next one is a multi-pronged question that could take hours. So maybe you can just pick one or two of the aspects. So this is from Dr. Bobby on Twitter. He asks, when students of the game actively participate in commonly recommended improvement methods, such as tactics, analyzing your own games, opening study, what are the common mistakes or flaws you see in the process of study each domain? So, excellent question, Dr. Bobby. But maybe you just want to pick one of those domains, Wojciech.
What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna try to do it differently. So I'm gonna pick like every single domain, and I'm gonna try and indicate the most kind of striking example that I frequently witness, when training my students. So, for example, when it goes for opening study, surely paying too much attention to like the specific lines that are being indicated by the engine. instead of like giving herself a chance to understand the underlying ideas behind the variation. Or maybe even if they do, sometimes they do not have the time to practice the line before going to an over the board tournament. This is obviously also like a typical sin of grandmasters. We check some lines with the engine very quickly before the game, and then we go straight and play it afterwards. And then very often you notice the situation when the typical grandmaster is going to lash out 20 moves in a row in the opening, and all of a sudden he sinks into deep thought as of move 21 for 30 minutes straight. And I look at a situation like this from the outside, and I say, oh yeah, he's out of book. He's out of book. Yeah, if I'm the opponent, I say to myself, now's my chance. Now, the likelihood, the probability that he's going to commit a mistake is probably the highest before, like the before his chess mind switches from recall towards creativity, basically from recall towards thinking on his own. When it goes for maybe tactics calculation, this is going to be quite interesting, I guess. Many people do not distinguish the difference between tactical training and calculation training, which leads them straight into this kind of catch-22 situation that they want to become better at calculation, but they do it by means of solving endless tactical exercises. The problem with this kind of approach is that tactics and calculation are two completely distinct things. There can be a tactical situation which is stripped of the need for calculation at all, whereas there can be a position in which you need to calculate a lot, but you're not going to spot a single tactical motif inside of this position because there's simply none. So those are two different things. I even remember like some kind of anecdote told to me by one of my students who would claim that his coach would present him with a database of like a couple of thousand mates in two. Yeah, and he claimed that after solving all of those exercises, my student would become like very good at calculation. Uh,
Hmm.
I'm obviously trying not to criticize anybody while during this interview because we chess coaches are like a big community and we try to respect each other, but this is plain wrong. Let's put it like this. Vision, absolutely. So an inherent element of both tactics and calculation. But in terms of tactics, it's more about pattern recognition. We're recognizing whether we are dealing with a fork, skewer, X-ray, etc. Decoy, deflection. Yeah, there are many of those. While when it goes for calculation, it's about prediction. It's about predicting what is going to come next. Right. So again, if you guys want to train calculation, make sure that the examples you're using for that purpose are actually helpful in this regard. Endgames, maybe endgames. When I think about endgame training, I mean, it's relatively simple in the sense that there are so many great books on theoretical endgames, let's say, like the two books, or maybe three already, published by New Chess by the Spanish author. Can you help me out a little bit
100
here?
Endgames you must know. Or
Exactly so, but who's the author?
De La Via.
Okay, yeah, absolutely so. So those I can wholeheartedly endorse. That's for sure. Definitely. But what's the point? The point is that when training endgames, many players forget that the endgame is actually a result of the middle game, or maybe even the opening itself, in the sense that there are some openings which transpose straight into the end game. So the end game cannot. It has to be literally has to be analyzed in conjunction with the preceding stage of the game, right? So very often I see, or maybe I hear my students say that they've been practicing theoretical endgames, for many weeks now, but the results of the training have not yet come because they have lost yet another endgame and yet another endgame afterwards. And then when we start analyzing, what went wrong, it was typically this kind of moment of transposition between the middle game and the end game that went wrong, that they maybe even recognized that there is this possibility to transpose into an end game and then maybe towards the theoretical end game that they knew. But maybe somewhere along the lines they didn't predict that the opponent could go in the other direction, so that there was more randomness available in the position. Right? This is already like a high level type of a mistake that people try to analyze learn more about stages of the game, particular stages of the game, in separation from each other. Whereas in reality, the game of chess is one big kind of a story, maybe with specific chapters, but those chapters are interconnected. So,
So
I mean, I'm sorry, those would be the basic mistakes that come to my mind, like right from the tip of my head. There are probably countless other mistakes also possible, because at the end of the day, we're just humans, right?
yeah, well, there were some brilliant insights there, Wojciech. And actually, I was working as I'm writing the book I talk about all the time. I'm really in crunch time, so I've been rereading stuff and tweaking stuff. And I was actually working on the tactics chapter yesterday. And you said much more succinctly something I was trying to say. So, with your permission, I'm going to quote what you just said about the difference between tactics and calculation in that section.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, they say that great minds think alike, and I'm flattered that I was able to like steal the idea from you.
I'm happy with that narrative, even even if it's not true. I'm going to run with that as well.
As long as both of us are happy. Exactly.
Excellent. All right. Well, we've got one more chess improvement question, and then I want to dig a little bit deeper on your book. And this one is from a friend of the pod and host of the Chess Journeys podcast, Kevin Scull, who's been a little active on Twitter talking about he reads a lot of chess books. He's got a PhD. He's a book lover. Like a lot of us chess fans, but he's now concerned that he's been reading too many chess books and not actually playing enough. So Kevin says he's read 30 or more chess books. Should he stop studying and play more, or should he try to keep trying to maintain a balance between studying and playing?
Mm-hmm. I think that judging by the way how this question has been formulated, the author of the question already knows what the answer thereto is.
Right.
Yeah, first of all, but okay, like half joking. That was half jokingly. Why? The real question is like, why do we train? Because we want to get better at chess. How do we get better at chess? Because I mean, we become better by playing against others, beating those people, hopefully gaining rating, so that we reach a situation that our playing strength manifests itself by the FIDE rating that we happen to have, right? That we happen to have achieved. So if the listener wants to get better at chess, obviously there's going to be a part of his training time, that is going to have to be devoted to study, to, I don't know, reading books, doing courses, but also he's going to eventually have to, go to a tournament, play some games, give himself a chance to use those skills that he has acquired, during his study, to use them in practice. And I think that in general, that's a very deep question, in the sense that many grandmasters struggle to, when planning the year, when trying to decide how many games are they going to play, throughout the coming 12 months. We always have this kind of dilemma, whether it should be like more than 60 games, or maybe 100 games, or maybe should we do it more bot-winning style, that is 40 games tops, right? But only strong tournaments. I mean, it's a bigger issue, because some people say you need to play a lot, because this way this is the best way of becoming stronger, the best training method available. Then again, there are some situations I have known of case. I knew a couple of cases like that. That there were people who would play literally tournament after tournament after tournament, and they wouldn't be able to recognize like why is there why does the rating stay the same? And then only somebody would tell them, okay, you need to analyze your games afterwards. You need to also work on your generic playing strength by studying some games, maybe reading some books. You need to kind of fill that chess mind of yours with information, so that this information can be used when you play, like the next tournament, for your own benefit. So In general, I'd say that every single player needs to strive to find balance between playing and training. Some people are going to be training by playing, and this is also a method for sure. On the other hand, I cannot imagine anybody who would just be playing, not training at all, and believing that this way he or she is going to get better, that they're going to climb some new rating highs. There's always time for training, in other words, and there's always a little bit of time for playing as well. But the specific balance, whether it's like 30% this, 70% the other one, it's like a very personal decision.
Yeah, yeah. And my first thought when I read Kevin's question was that you need to clearly define your objective, because Kevin, like a lot of the people listening, I mean, he's not a chess professional. Like, he wants to get better at chess, and I know he is playing regularly in the LA area. But at the same time, you have a family, so you've got to balance your priorities. And I think Kevin probably enjoys reading books, and I think that's part of the component to me as well. So, like for me personally, like I would like to get better at chess, but at some point I just decided my goal as a chess player is not to optimize my improvement every moment. Like part of the reason I read chess books is because I enjoy them, and maybe solving endgame studies would be better for my game, but that's not really going to change my life one way or the other. So, you know, I think it's very important to just know going in, am I trying to optimize every moment of my chess improvement, or am I trying to get better and also lead a balanced life and have fun? And everyone's going to calibrate it differently, but I think it impacts how you approach the game. And the other thing, as you say, is like Kevin does play tournaments, but I don't know if he's referring specifically to tournaments, because obviously the lower stakes the game you play, sort of the more it might tilt the balance to something you're just doing strictly for fun, which again is fine, but gets back to the question of your objective.
I mean, it's whenever I'm gonna approach the problem from another perspective. Then, so whenever I start a new cooperation with a student of mine, what we do is trying to determine. I mean, creating a customized training program, right? And this program is supposed to be comprehensive in a sense that it covers all areas of the game. So openings, strategy, end games, tactics calculation, but also like the fifth kind of chunk is going to be practical play. And if you see a player that is that has a very balanced playing style, you're typically going to do like an average of you divide like the 100% of the time that you happen to have into five equal parts, and it's going to be 20% this, 20% that, all the way till the end. However, there are some players who are, for example, extremely rusty because they do train a lot on their own, but they barely play any tournaments. And in such a case, I recommend the so-called weighted average, right? So I shift like 10% of end games, let's say, to practical play. And I asked the given player to play a little bit more every day. So instead of like an hour per day, let's make it 1.5. Yeah. If I see that this player is specifically very good at endgames, this kind of deduction, those 10%, this half an hour less per day, isn't going to really hurt him. Whereas being rusty takes its toll on just about every player I can imagine for the time being. Yeah. So weighted average in this context would mean that it's not going to be 20% openings, 20% strategy, all the way till the end. It's going to fluctuate, like 15% this, 25% that, 10% something else, 30% this and that. At the end of the day, however, I always laugh that. I'm pretty sure that I do not have a student who obeys this, like religiously every day. I'm pretty sure about this. Whenever I ask, I stopped asking, because whenever I ask, I hear, I'm going to be honest with you, coach.
Right.
I do it my way. But okay, like whatever suits them best. If results are coming, and they usually do come, so why would I complain, right?
Okay, excellent advice there. And I did want to discuss Supreme Chess Understanding a bit more. A couple things I just like to remind listeners. Number one, it's available on Forward Chess, which is an ebook reader, so that you can play through it on a tablet like an iPad. Number two, Thinkers Publishing, Wojciech's publisher, always has a free preview. So I'll link to it in the show notes. But basically, if you Google the book title and go to the Thinkers Publishing page, you can check out a sample of the book for free. And my question to this book, because again, some of these moves are just off the wall in terms of like how well they illustrate the idea of choosing dynamics over statics and playing unexpected moves. So I know you work hard assembling the material for your books, but I'm curious how you do it. Like, do you have the engine on? Is the engine finding these moves, or are you finding these moves? Because so many of them were missed by grandmasters.
I mean, obviously, engine usage is indispensable, at the very least, for the purpose of making sure that the exercise that I provide makes sense, that it doesn't have additional solutions, so-called doubles, right? That actually, that the lines that I want to quote, that they hold, that they make sense as well. Yeah, you know, the role of the coach is to provide the students with high quality training material. So every single day I do a lot of work in this context. Namely, I check out the latest games and tournaments, basically in search of suitable examples. Right. Depending on the strength of the given player, those examples are going to be different naturally. Like a weaker player cannot possibly solve some of the exercises that the grandmaster is capable of doing. On the other hand, very often those exercises, those puzzles, if you kind of approach them in the proper way, if you serve as a coach, as a moderator for the student, you could even use a complex example to teach like some kind of like, let's say, like a prodigy, like a younger player about it, because you're going to be doing a lot of explanations, right? You're going to be trying to simply cover every single element of the position. So in order to ensure that like that the student has understood what you're talking about, and also in order simply to cut the learning curve. But coming back to your question, yeah, I mean, my philosophy when writing books is exactly that I want to provide the readers with hopefully completely new and like until this point of time unknown material. Sometimes it works. Sometimes, I mean, most of the time it works. Sometimes my readers come back to me saying, "Oh, but I've known this example. I've seen it actually live." I'm like, "Okay, good for you, basically." But statistically speaking, most of the people did not. One thing that I want to avoid for sure is a situation when like a situation in which I was a victim of for many years now as a player to a certain degree, but also as a coach. Because, well, imagine that you're looking for high class material for your students, or maybe you want to train on your own. You want to become a better player yourself. You buy this book that is advertised by everybody as excellent, and all of a sudden, after like skimming through it very quickly, you learn that 50% of the examples already. And I'm like, I want like half of the price back, obviously, from the publisher. No, seriously, what's the point? The point is that I, by writing books, I mean not only Supreme Chess Understanding, but also Universal Chess Training. On the one hand, I want to give players a chance to learn something completely new, a chance that was very difficult for me to get, when I was younger. A chance to get affordable training material, because like my book costs like half an hour. It's roughly the cost of half an hour of personal training with me. So if you get like 65 examples for the price of half an hour, I think it's a bargain, basically.
For
Right?
sure.
On the yeah, I mean, on the other hand, the thing is that when I write those books, I want to make sure that also I touch upon topics that haven't been so broadly discussed in chess literature so far. So, for example, statics, dynamics. Everybody knows or believes that they know what dynamic play is all about. There are even books that have the word dynamics in their titles. On the other hand, for example, statics. I mean, I haven't seen a book that would contain this word so far. Whereas statics is obviously like the other side of the medal, if dynamics is like the like on like on the side of the other side of the coin, basically, right? So also many books that have dynamics in their title. They actually focus on showing beautiful examples of tactics to the reader without really sometimes even explaining that there's also this other aspect. Yeah. So also my first book was special in the sense that it's very difficult to find something similar on the market, and for me it's like some sort of an autotherapy in the sense that I want to fill the gap that I have noticed on the publishing market by providing material that would be otherwise not obtainable for readers, right? So you will never, in other words, you will never see me write like a simple book with examples that have already been seen in the 50s or the 60s, because this would amount to pure loss of time, I'd say. And this kind of philosophy, at least judging by the feedback of my readers, has been appreciated. And if I get a lot of feedback and people like it, I feel that there's need for this, and I'm going to try and continue acting accordingly.
Excellent. Yeah. I mean, I'm glad to see it because I know how much work goes into a book like this. I wanted to read a quote just to give listeners a feel. And yeah, I do want to mention, I mean, the book is a bit whimsical. It's funny, in addition to being extremely instructive. So this is in the context of a King's Indian position between Casa Corley and Levy Rosman. And if we have time, I'd like to hear about your experience coaching Levy. But
Sure.
so you say, so there's a position where there's a piece sack and you're describing this sack and you say there's three types of chess players in the world. First, the ones who believe it to be imperative to defend a pawn that's under attack. These persons still need to train some more in order to get within striking distance of the GM title. Second, the ones who can seriously consider playing the move that sacrifices, but start wondering whether their initiative is going to be enough to compensate for the missing material. Those players, on the other hand, consider the text move to be a sacrifice, in quotes. The third group of players will play this move, knight e5, without really noticing that they're sacrificing anything because they understand that the arising position is not about material anymore. For them, material and time in chess blend together into one indistinguishable currency with which they pay the opponents for the possibility to activate their pieces and proceed with their plans. So, dear reader, which group do you belong to? And the answer, Wojciech, I belong to group two.
I've been guilty of belonging to group one many times already, so
Okay.
that resonates with me when I hear it from the outside in, basically, right? So no, seriously, that's how it works. Materialism is a huge problem in chess, with many chess players. We all know those people who barely ever sacrifice material. Yeah, I mean, what I often try to do when writing, it's not only that I relate to what is happening on the board strictly, but I also try to imagine like a typical kind of a player handling the very same type of a position, and at the same time, what kind of thoughts and emotions would be going through for the soul and for the mind of such a player, because we cannot really teach to play chess on a high level in practice without really speaking about the psychology of what is happening in the chess mind at the time when we are parting with material. This is very difficult because we've been always taught that material, that it's very important to be up on material. If we are, then we're going to win eventually. If nothing changes, if nothing happens along the way, and it kind of stays with us, even if we become grandmasters. We obviously, if you ask anybody whether they prefer to be up or down on material, we do not even have to answer this question anymore. Everybody wants to be a pawn up. Then again, as mentioned, that quote of you, the kind of those sentences that you have mentioned, material is just some sort of means to an end, right? The end purpose of the game is made, and this is also why the stronger you get, the less you distinguish, the less you treat material as something more important, a more important positional element than anything else, like compared to initiative, for example, time, coordination, or maybe other elements of the evaluation of the position. That's very important because many people, they like material because material is easily understandable. So even a layperson is going to quickly say whether he or she is up or down on material, but whether there is compensation, what sort of compensation and the position and how to proceed. This is like the higher school of chess, basically, right? So even on GM level, materialism is a very prevalent sin, I'd say. Personally, I've been guilty many times of not willing to part with material, even if I understood that that's probably the best way to complicate matters on the board to avoid the worst of fates that's made or maybe a lost position in general. And yeah, in general, when I think about it, um, like if we want to unlearn this materialism to a certain degree, if we want to have more flow in this context, maybe studying some games featuring ample amounts of compensation for the material would help. Maybe I mean I did mention this sort of an experiment in the book that you go to like a meaningless rapid or blitz tournament somewhere locally to just play some games and with this kind of um, with this kind of idea in mind that you're going to try to sacrifice a pawn in every single game of yours, notwithstanding whether it's going to be promising or working at all or not. Yeah, the point is just to be exposed to such situations in which you are a pawn down, and you simply have to learn, simply have to handle the position somehow. And this way, you're also going to understand that maybe it's not the end of the world if you're a pawn down. Maybe it's just the beginning of something better. Maybe this actually makes sense to from time to time part with material. This is going to broaden the scope of your chess weaponry, your arsenal in your own games.
Yeah, I had highlighted that passage as well, where you suggest that experiment at a different tournament. I don't know if I'll try it, but I clearly could benefit from it, and I think, as you say, and I know you recommended Beyond Material by Grandmaster Davorin Koyusevich, which is another. It's in a similar spirit to yours. I think one of the few books that can help along similar lines if you struggle with the chess sin known as materialism. So we got a couple more topics I'd like to hit, and one more question I want to come back to from a listener. But I do want to hear a little bit about your experience coaching Levy, since his name recently came up. Uh, what was it like working with him? What was he like as a student? Let's start with that.
I mean, yeah, he was fun. I mean, it was really awesome back in 2020 when we started training together. He appeared to he. I mean, I'm gonna be disclosing some hopefully not confidential information right now. Yeah, so hopefully Levy is not gonna mind too much, right? So basically, he appeared to be a very dynamic player, but dynamic players also tend to be unstable at times, right? So the point is that when you start working with a player like this, we need to show him that there are also other ways of handling the position. Naturally, on Levy's level back then, which was around 2400, a lot of emphasis is being put on opening preparation, but like a responsible coach is definitely not going to neglect other areas of the game either. We had a couple of lessons. I think something like 20. I can be wrong, but it must have been something like 20, 30 hours altogether. And yeah, I mean, sadly for me, Levy decided to abandon his attempts of becoming a grandmaster. I'm pretty sure that if he had continued, training back then, be it with me or with another kind of coach, or maybe just on his own, he would have crossed the 2,500 threshold with ease. Nowadays, he would have been already a grandmaster. But on the other hand, something that you have mentioned previously, and during our interview, is that we need to understand what our mission in life actually is, right? So in Levy's case, if you observe his activity, if you observe how many the lives of how many people has he influenced positively all over the world, you start understanding that it doesn't really matter whether he's an IM or a GM. To me, he's not only a GM in chess streaming, he's like a super duper
Yeah,
ultra kind of a GM in chess streaming. And his efforts in making the game popular, actually I think that he should have some kind of statue, like in the
yeah.
Central Park in New York, kind of put in his name, basically, right? So you see, this is the thing. If he had continued pursuing the goal of becoming a GM, which isn't like a completely kind of a gone concern. He can still become a GM, right? Any day, any day. In my personal opinion, for him, is like 2 years of hard training to make it. Yeah, from this point on, from this moment of time. But what's the point? The point is that his legacy is to popularize the game, to actually. I think that to say that he has made the game familiar to hundreds of millions of people all over the world would be an understatement. So if you think about it in those terms, I think we can easily forgive him for not becoming a grandmaster yet. That's very important. Yet, because I do truly believe somewhere at the bottom of my heart that this is just a postponement. It's not, like some kind of final decision, not on his side, not to pursue this title any further, because my personal expertise tells me that he totally deserves it, and if he only wanted, if he invested the time, he would have surely attained the title. That's for sure. I'm absolutely 100% positive that this is the case.
Yeah, I remember him quoting you in one of the times I interviewed him, where you had mentioned that you were very impressed with his dynamic play, that he doesn't struggle in that facet of the game. Yeah, and when I've interviewed him or thought about it, because as someone I don't know Levy well, listeners have heard my conversations with him. It's not like we're chatting all the time beyond beyond the times we've interviewed, but I know that it's again, it comes back to the question of opportunity cost, because when he says he doesn't have time to pursue the GM title, sometimes I think, well, really, no one has more time than him, because because he's so successful, and he sets his
Mhm.
own schedule. But on the other
Mhm.
hand, the financial opportunity cost is higher for anyone, and you make a really good point about the extreme value he's providing to the chess community through what he's doing, and that being of greater value than the recap videos I would enjoy of his anguish as he battles with another 12-year-old prodigy.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, exactly. Obviously, there were also other matters involved. He was very kind of vocal in his attempts to, like draw the attention of the wider public to, also the psychological health of players, because
Right.
when nobody talks about it. Actually, many people believe that GMs on the higher level are like cyborgs, emotionless. But I can't really count the number of sleepless nights that I had during tournaments, and every single, and like all the stress that you undergo in between tournaments to become better, all the expectations, how you manage those expectations from sponsors, or maybe like being aware that a singular tournament can actually lead to like a grandmaster being expelled from the national team, let's assume. Yeah, so this is a lot of stress to handle, and nobody talks about it. Everybody expects performance, and like the advent of chess engines, where you can follow a game and concurrently you can check the eval of a singular move with the machine, and the machine provides you with ready answers. You start assuming that that grandmaster is actually a complete idiot because he didn't see this and that, basically, and this is obviously not true, right? So I have a lot of understanding and sympathy for Levy's motives, not to pursue his the quest towards GM any further. But I do believe personally that this is just like a short break, because all the best is still ahead of him, in my personal opinion. If he wanted to, if he just resumed his this kind of quest, this path towards the GM title, this wouldn't take long before we would be talking about Grandmaster Rosman instead of I am an international master.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, it would be fun to watch if he does find the energy, but we all have to make our own decisions, and others need to respect that. And we have a Patreon mailbag question from Cedric Ryman. Thanks for supporting the pod, Cedric. And so, uh, again, on the Gotham City podcast, you talked about the decision to give up a career in law to pursue becoming a chess trainer, something that obviously, especially because you have a family, has decent sized ramifications and is not necessarily an individual decision. But you mentioned you've been really happy with that decision. So, just to give that bit of context for listeners, Cedric asks, he says, would you have any advice for people interested in a career switch towards chess training as you did? Any resources you would recommend to become a chess trainer? What is the minimum chess strength for a player to become a trainer?
Hmm. Well, first of all, if I were you, I would first and foremost make sure that this is exactly what you want. Because the decision to quit one's day job in order to pursue a career related to chess, like chess being something that is, compared to like a regular day job, is considered by most of the society to be, well, even expendable, we could say at times, right? Basically, you might want to make sure that you're going to be able to make a living out of that, and that this is actually also something that you really like. Yeah? I do not think that there are any specific rating caps that are required for you to become a coach. We can use another example. Let's say Michael Phelps and his famous coach Bob Bowman. As far as I remember, Bob Bowman doesn't swim faster than Michael Phelps. At least,
Yes.
at least never he never really did. But it doesn't mean that he cannot really help him. In other words, translated to chess, I've known 2200 rated players who were coaching 2600s. So it's not about how strong the player who wants to become a coach actually is. It's more about the value that he brings with him. Also, if we're already talking about ratings, sometimes let's assume you're at 2600 and you're guiding at 2100 all the way to the very same level. This can prove helpful when it goes for specific situations, problems that you have already encountered in your life, and this is what makes it easier for you to advise the player that you're coaching, how to handle such situations, be it again expectations or maybe specific tournament situations, opening preparation when it goes for a specific rival. But in general, like what is really required when it goes for being for becoming a chess coach, in my personal opinion, didactic skills. That's for sure. Not understood as a degree in pedagogy. How do you pronounce this?
Yeah, pedagogy.
Pedagogic,
Yeah.
pedagogic kind of a degree. Not really. It's rather that you need to be a good psychologist, because you're going to be encountering so many situations, you're going to be dealing with so many problems of your students, problems that sometimes you're not even going to be capable of expecting, like miles away, let's say, right? Basically, students are also human beings, and very often they're subject to emotions that might affect their play in a given situation. So you need to be ready to handle those emotions. You need to be ready to react depending on, to help the student depending on the current tournament situation, let's say, for example. I mean, there are going to be situations in the life of a coach that are going to be really testing for you. Situations that at first glance affect the player only, while in reality you're going to have to handle those situations psychologically as well. I think I can name a very good example in this context. I've been training with this Polish female player. Her name is Michalina Rudzińska for a couple of years now. We started working together in 2022, at the beginning of 2022. And back then, I barely knew her. The only thing that I knew about her was that she was like the former under 20 Polish championship, and also that a year earlier, that is in 2021, she participated for the first time in the Polish like female adult championships, right? Like the the best kind of tournament for women in my native country, and she got beaten to the ground. Like she was the last seed, she ended up last, and yeah, back then she was like a pushover. And then you take such a student, you accept her because you see potential in her. You understand that the starting point is very rough, because she has just gotten herself beaten to the ground. But you understand that she has potential, and you feel that she's like the underdog, and you sympathize with underdogs, basically. It took us 5 months. I mean, 5 months of training until she won the event next year. She won the event as the underdog, as the last seed. She wasn't even supposed to participate in the tournament, because only it was just that one of her rivals resigned at the very last moment, and this is why she got admitted. But the thing is that, so we could say, okay, that's a chess Cinderella kind of a story. I personally call her chess Cinderella, right? But what's the point? The point is that it wasn't a normal kind of training relationship, in a sense that that I was providing exercises and we were training, talking about their opponents. Obviously, we did that as well, but sometimes you need to be the person who makes the difference, the person who tells the student specifically, this is what you're doing wrong, and this is the other thing that you're doing wrong. Fix those two things. I'm going to help you with that, and then the path to success is open for you. This is what we did. You need to be able to spot such things, and this is exactly when playing strength is going to help you. But you can also use experience if you have any so far. And I'm going to maybe go a little bit beyond the question that has been asked, because I think that the story is really worth talking about, worth mentioning. It was May 2022, and from the moment we started working together, she had gained by that point of time already like 100 points. And you could assume, yeah, like the chess world is at her feet. She got nominated for the national team to the Olympiad for, like as a 21-year-old or a 20-year-old. And you could say from this point on, it's just like an upward trend. She's going to be like the price chart of Coca-Cola, basically only upwards all the time. Yeah. Well, fate had different plans for her. She went to another tournament. She lost 20 points. Another tournament, another 20 points in the minus. Right. Before we noticed that, she was back to her to her to her starting point 2200 more or less. Right. So what are you going to tell a student like this? What are you going to say to her? Are you going to say, oh, yeah, it happens, but it's a tendency, right? 5 bad tournaments in a row. What are you going to tell her, especially as the next edition of the female championships is around the corner, right? Well, basically, I said, trust the process. Trust the process. Everything is going in the right direction. You've been playing mainly against males. You've been gaining experience. It doesn't matter that you've lost the points. You're still the national champion, and you're going to go out there and you're going to try and win again. Guess what? She was the ninth seed this time out of 10 players, and she won the title once again this time. And this is something close to a Guinness World Record. I'm pretty sure about it, right? And in the darkest of moments, when I'm pretty sure that she was considering firing me, I'm pretty sure about this, right? Okay, she never said something like this. She's a super nice person, etc. But I'm pretty sure that every single player, when they have a coach and things are not going in the right direction, they start thinking about stuff like this, maybe giving some other coach a chance. In the darkest of moments, I asked her, all the good things that happened to you this year, thanks to you becoming the national champion, do you think that would you prefer to trade them for 100 elo points that you lost, like on your path to this point? And she said, obviously not. And this was exactly the thing. When coaching others, you're gonna be with them, on their path towards success, but the path towards success is not always strewn with roses. Sometimes it's super bumpy, and you need to be ready. You need to be confident that you're gonna be able to help those people.
And I have a few tips to add for Cedric or anyone listening as well, since I'm not a grandmaster and have taught chess for a living and now doing mostly the podcast, but certainly know a lot of chess teachers who are not grandmasters. Number one, Cedric had asked for resources. Again, it's helpful if you know exactly what your objective is. I know there's some people who've become online teachers, and I did look up Cedric's rating. He's about 2,100 FIDE, which means he's, in my opinion, plenty strong to find students. He doesn't necessarily need to coach grandmasters, especially I'm very bullish on chess right now, which I can't honestly say. It's not like I've always felt that way, but it just feels like everything's coming together. The younger generation's interested. We've got great leadership in terms of the corporations like chess.com pushing things forward. And I think there's a lot of opportunity still for chess trainers and working in chess generally. But depending, sorry, I'm losing my voice. So one thing is, if you're interested in teaching online, then you probably need to develop some sort of following to differentiate yourself from other players, especially as someone who's not going to differentiate yourself necessarily in chess strength. So you can specialize in a certain opening, a certain variant. You can start a blog. It's tough to gain a YouTube following, but you can try. Generally, at this stage of sort of content development, the more specific the thing you're presenting, the greater chance you have of finding a loyal audience, even under the chess umbrella. Maybe about a specific opening or a specific aspect of chess that you might want to specialize in. That's if you're interested in online. If you're interested in more IRL chess teaching, then I would recommend listening to my podcast. The first interview I did with Peter Giannatos, who founded the Charlotte Chess Center, and also an old interview I did with Adam Weisbarth, who founded the Silver Knights Chess Academy, which subsequently became the Magnus Academy. Here in the US, there's lots of opportunities for scholastic teachers, especially in places like Charlotte, Washington, D.C., New York, Arizona. Cedric, unfortunately, I don't know how it works in Europe as well, and maybe you would be able to speak to this, Wojciech, but my opinion is that if there is not as much infrastructure in place for sort of school programs where you can be the facilitator and make a living, then it wouldn't surprise me if things move in that direction. So depending on what Cedric exactly is looking to do, that might be an angle you pursue. Do you think there's much opportunity there in Europe, Wojciech?
Definitely. I mean, at least in my country, you have this program called Chess in Schools, and actually, from the perspective of statistics, it has been a colossal success. It's being conducted by the Polish Chess Federation, but I also know about some involvement of Chess.com via Chess Kid, as far as I can
Yeah.
tell. Right. So this is also a big thing. In France, I'm not really sure. I know some players from France, so maybe like it's rather that Cedric should ask, like locally. Then again, with his rating, first things first, I wouldn't mind, starting out by teaching some kind of kids first, just to
Yeah.
gain a little bit of experience first. I mean, 2100 doesn't disqualify from training higher rated players, but there's always this kind of little difficulty that higher rated players. They do expect professional care, so they're going to be immediately disqualifying lower rated coaches as long as they are not kind of renowned enough. Let's put it like this, right? So again, I've known 2200 rated coaches of GMs, but these 2200s were actually very well known for their good training methods. Then again, if Cedric is just a beginner, I mean, in terms of just training others, he first needs to create a brand, as you said, become noticeable, share some thoughts of his own via different media, right, like blogs, leeches, etc. And once he happens to acquire already like a certain amount of audience, let's put it like this, then people are going to be flocking towards him, provided obviously he has something that we call moat, something that other people do not have optimally, right? Something that he can offer to the community, like an additional skill that supplements, like pure chess teaching. So we know, for example, chess psychologists. We know people who, I'm sorry, who focus on like a specific kind of area of the game. We distinguish analysts who just do openings for the top guys. Finally, we have people who just deal like with a specific type of a student that is, for example, kids, as mentioned. Right. So I think that everybody also needs to find their niche, within this kind of job sector.
Yep. Yeah, well said. Good advice. And last thing, one other resource. There's an old book from New in Chess. It's called like the Chess Instructor's Manual. I think it's like 2009, which has some good chapters on sort of the didactics of teaching chess. So and you can get that used. So I think I think Jesper Hall, who's got a successful program in Sweden, wrote a book in the past couple years that may also be worth checking out. Although I have to confess that I
Um,
have not read that one.
There are
Um,
also a couple of books that the titles of which do not really suggest that they have anything to do with coaching, but they're super useful for coaches. For example, Kuliasevich's "How to Study Chess on Your Own" basically is
right.
like a compendium of different types of training methods, right? So it's going to be super helpful for teachers, in my personal opinion. We have got The book by the late Mark Tversky, I might be twisting the title a little bit. It was something along the lines of Memoirs of a Coach, something like this. There were probably even two parts, 2 volumes of this book. They were translated to English as far as I can tell. And they would kind of speak about the job of a coach from the more kind of okay, there were so many examples inside, but also from the societal perspective, the perspective of like the coach himself, how he viewed like his job, right? What were the difficulties? I do remember the 5th part of the Grandmaster Preparation series by Jacob Ober. The title was thinking inside the box as opposed to outside the box,
Yeah.
right? Which is like a common kind of way to put things. And I do remember that this book was also helpful for me when it goes for creating, my sort of maybe not training curriculum, but rather, kind of uh, putting all the right things into place when it goes for like how I want to function as a coach. So this was, in other words, this book was particularly helpful for myself, like back in the days. So many sources, and many of those not even wouldn't even suggest at first glance that they might be helpful for a potential future coach. That's for sure.
Okay, great. Yeah, and one more recommendation: Chess for Educators by Karel van Delft, who's a highly respected trainer in the Netherlands. Another recent book. So, and I'll link to all this stuff because I know it's a lot. And Cedric, let me know how it goes, and if you have a more specific question, would be happy to answer it on a future pod. Last thing for you, Wojciech, I got to get your big picture thoughts on the World Championship before we go.
Um, well, I didn't have high expectations before the event regarding this matchup. Basically, we know that the moment Magnus decided not to defend his title anymore, like probably something like 50% of the publicity potential has been lost. Obviously, some people even complained about the lack of advertising efforts, outside of, like on a global scale, let's say, compared to previous, world championship matches. Obviously, the absence of Magnus took its toll on the popularity of the match, but the match itself was really interesting when it goes for the pure chess aspect, right? So, for the first time in many years, we saw an encounter in which the opponents would genuinely go after each other. So they wouldn't hide behind a double guard. They would actually fight very hard. Sometimes assuming even excessive risks. This didn't seem to be the case previously. I think because everybody knew if they lose a game against Magnus, they're probably not going to bounce back. Yeah? So we do all remember the 2018 match between Fabi and Magnus, and what Fabi did in order to be able to draw all of those 12 games in that match. He actually, from a player who is very dynamic, very kind of very attacking in nature, with all sorts of like explosive opening ideas, he decided to stick to the Petrov and the QHD as black, which was, let's say, anticlimactic to say the least. Yeah, let's
Hmm.
put it like that. It didn't help him eventually. I mean, to secure the title, but it brought him very close to becoming a world champion, wasn't it? Obviously for the rapid tiebreak. Anyways, this match, like Ding Niepo had like everything that the world championship should have. There was one player who was chasing and the other one being chased in terms of the points that they had, at a given point of time. There were leaks, right? Opening preparation leaks. So there was a little bit of drama behind the scenes. There was some mention of psychological health. Depression was the key word, after the second round. We had Ding apparently changing his hotel room, or maybe the whole hotel, for any reason whatsoever. I do not know why, but okay, maybe somebody, this is going to get revealed one day. In any case, we had a tiebreak. We had some controversial opening decisions being taken, not only opening decisions, but also on the over the board decisions purely, when we consider that Rook G6 move in the final winning position for Ding. Right? Finally, what I liked very much was this kind of human aspect, of the match. When after the match, the internet was, full of those pictures of like Ding and Richard Rapport hugging each other, the family of Ding actually joining him, and this sparked joy. Basically, very often we treat those contenders as cyborgs, the best of the best, to a certain extent, inhuman people who are just there to play their best chess and prevail. But there are human beings with human weaknesses. We've also had those funny kind of rumors, for example, pertaining to that famous sleeping pill. I don't know if you've heard about the vanishing
Yeah, the missing
sleeping
sleeping
pill.
pill. Yeah.
Yeah, who would have thought that, like the world championship title is gonna depend on a sleeping pill?
Yeah, so there's
Obviously, that's a joke.
yeah, for listeners, there's a story by Sean Engel which I linked to in the Perpetual Chess Link Fest. And I'll link to in the show description. But yeah, Nepo apparently he'd mentioned in the prior World Championship he had some trouble sleeping, so he had sleeping pills this time, and he said some of them worked, but he had one that he called the magic pill that really helped him sleep. And he said before the final, I believe it was the final classical round, the magic pill was the one that the maid apparently in the maid or something turned up missing. I mean, I don't think there was any sort of conspiracy because who would know to take that one pill out of his handful there? But a funny story in any event.
I mean, that's kind of interesting. We could joke a little bit more about this. That also seconds, basically, it's like a famous fact that everybody knows about it. That seconds do not sleep during such a world championship too much either. Yeah? On one hand, because when the player is sleeping, they are working, they're doing the research, and when the player goes to the playing hall, it's like the only opportunity for them to catch some sleep. Whereas the curiosity of whether the opening preparation work
Right.
is so big that they're not going to be able to take a nap anyhow at that point of time, which means that very often they end up being more exhausted than the player himself towards the end of the event. So in other words, what I want to emphasize is that from a perspective of a GM, what is most interesting about World Championship match are the games themselves. Whereas for lay people or maybe amateurs, like the surrounding kind of aura, the atmosphere around the match is more exciting. Yeah. Then again, in this specific case, I I learned to appreciate also the other perspective. Right, so I enjoyed the broadcast. I enjoyed the stories surrounding the whole event very much, and mm, yeah, yeah, definitely this was a like a great time to be alive. That those World Championship matches are once again so exciting.
Yeah, well said. All right. Well, Wojciech, we both have our kids fending for themselves, so we should probably say goodbye. But this has been amazing. The book is called Supreme Chess Understanding. Highly recommend it. Very fun read and super instructive. And as Wojciech said, original examples. Wojciech, anything to add before we say our goodbyes?
No, maybe just that it was a huge pleasure to be a returning guest on your podcast once again. Yeah, keeping my fingers crossed for all the or all of your listeners. Hope that all of the people who ask questions that they're gonna be successful. Like with the answers to those questions and in general in life. And yeah, once again, thank you very much and. Maybe looking forward to repeating this in the future, maybe in a couple of
Sounds
years.
good. And correct me if I'm wrong, Wojciech, but you're not big on social media, but you do have a Lee Chess Coaches page. Is that a accurate summation?
Exactly. So my nickname is GM Moranda, so you cannot possibly miss it. Also on chess.com, I have an account. I do not do social media because I simply do not have the time for this. If I consider writing like a blog post or maybe publishing something on a Facebook, or maybe I have a choice between this and finding yet another example for my students, I'm gonna choose the latter.
Good for you.
Right.
Yeah. If I didn't have social media, my book would already be done.
You see.
All right. Well,
Exactly.
Wojciech, it's been fun as always. Yeah. And good luck with the book and look forward to chatting again sometime in the future.
Thank you very much.